Have you ever wondered what the Earth still remembers? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where the past still whispers through stone and silence. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. It helps more dreamers find their way here. Now, tell me, what time is it, where you are tonight? The spear that pierced the earth. They say a single stone can hold the memory of 1,000 storms. In the rolling green countryside of Brittany, where fog lingers like breath on the morning air, and the soil smells of salt and thyme, there stands a monument older than any written word carved in the French tongue. It rises from the earth not as a ruin, but as a survivor, the Menhir de Champ-Dolent, a solitary granite pillar so tall it seems to pierce the sky itself. Locals call it the spear that pinned the earth in place. When the sun climbs low across the Breton fields, its shadow stretches like a sundial drawn by the gods, reminding those who pass that people once built faith and fear into the very bones of the land. The stone stands just south of Dal de Breton, a modest town near the northern coast, but the countryside surrounding it hums with an ancient silence. Travelers who stumble upon it often describe a strange stillness, as if even the wind pauses to pay respect. The Menhir rises over 30 feet high, nearly 10 meters of rough pinkish granite, quarried from stone that does not occur naturally nearby. Whoever raised it carried or dragged this immense mass for kilometers across uneven ground, before balancing it with uncanny precision in the soil where it still stands today. Archaeologists estimate it was erected around 5,000 years ago, during the Neolithic, at a time when farming was still young in Europe, and when people measured meaning not with words but with weight, height, and alignment to the sun. The prehistoric builders who placed it here left no writing, no blueprint, no signature, but they left intent. The Menhir de Champ-Dolent belongs to a vast constellation of standing stones scattered across Brittany, cousins to Carnaic's endless rows and distant echoes of monuments found in Ireland and Britain. Yet this one is alone. It is singular, solemn, and somehow more human because of that isolation. For centuries, people have asked the same question: why here? Legends grew faster than answers. One tale claims that two warring brothers once fought across these fields, and that God, angered by their bloodshed, struck a spear of stone from the heavens to separate them forever. It fell between them, ending their battle and leaving this pillar as witness. The word dolent, meaning sorrowful, still clings to that story. The field of sorrow, the field where the earth itself mourned. Another story whispers that it marks the site of a vanished city swallowed by divine wrath. Some villagers, passing the stone at dusk, swear they have heard faint cries beneath their feet, as if the earth itself remembered being struck. Farmers in the Middle Ages avoided plowing too near, fearing to disturb the spirit trapped beneath. They said that each year, the stone sinks slowly deeper into the ground, inch by inch, and that on the day it disappears completely, the world will end. Even now, a faint trench circles its base where rainwater gathers, perhaps carved by centuries of footsteps from pilgrims and the merely curious. But legends alone cannot account for the astonishing precision with which it was placed. When measured against the line of the midsummer sunrise, the Menhir stands almost perfectly oriented toward the rising sun, a deliberate choice. To the people who lived here 5 millennia ago, the sun's movement marked not just time but divinity, fertility, and the turning of life itself. Some archaeologists believe the stone was once part of a larger ceremonial complex, now long dismantled, where rituals connected the heavens to the harvest. Standing stones like this could have served as boundary markers, as memorials to the dead, or as instruments of celestial observation. But unlike temples that crumble, or tombs that can be looted, a menhir resists interpretation. It simply is. Walk close to it and the texture of the granite reveals ancient scars, grooves carved by both wind and human hands. Lichen maps its surface in pale green constellations. In certain lights the stone almost glows, as though it still radiates the heat of its making. Imagine the day it was raised. Hundreds of people gathering in the field, ropes thick as arms pulling against wood rollers, songs rising to keep rhythm. The effort would have required generations of knowledge, of leverage, of geometry, of the cooperation that turns stone into story. The people of that time had no cities as we know them, no written law, yet they possessed the will to move mountains. Once the Menhir stood upright, it would have dominated the landscape for miles, visible to every traveler crossing the plain, an ever-present reminder of human endurance. The Bronze Age arrived, bringing new tools, new gods, new wars. Still the stone remained. The Romans came to Gaul, marching their legions across the land, carving roads and temples, and claiming the soil as empire. They saw the great Menhir, and according to some accounts feared it. To the pragmatic Roman mind it represented an older magic, something that could not be conquered. They built their shrines elsewhere, leaving it untouched. In later centuries, Christian missionaries came to Brittany, toppling pagan monuments and replacing them with crosses, but this stone was too large, too solid, too deeply rooted. Instead, they tried to claim it by faith. Crosses were sometimes carved on its base, prayers were said to sanctify it, transforming an ancient idol into a Christian relic. Yet the feeling of reverence remained the same. Even the church could not fully erase the sense that the stone had seen more than any priest. When medieval chroniclers wrote of the piercing stone of Dolent, they described it as both a wonder and a warning. In the 13th century, pilgrims walking to Mont Saint-Michel would detour to stand before it, placing their hands against the cold granite in hopes of gaining strength for the journey ahead. Some travelers left coins, others small offerings of bread or salt. Over time, these gestures merged into folklore. Couples would circle the stone to ensure fertility, soldiers would touch it before battle for luck. Centuries passed, yet the Menhir endured, empires fell, languages changed, the stone stayed rooted in its silent sermon. When early antiquarians began studying megaliths in the 18th and 19th centuries, Champ-Dolent became a curiosity. Scholars debated whether it marked a burial, a border, or a forgotten temple of the Druids, though in truth the stone predates any known Celtic presence. They measured its shadow at noon, analyzed its grain, even speculated about magnetic anomalies in the earth beneath it, but none of their theories diminished its aura. In the late 19th century, a small stone cross was planted atop it, an attempt by local clergy to Christianize its pagan reputation once more. Lightning soon struck and shattered the cross, leaving only the menhir intact, a fitting reminder that some symbols outlast all others. Standing before it today, one feels the strange overlap of ages. Modern life hums just beyond the hedges. Cars on a distant road, the scent of diesel mingling with wet grass, but the stone remains indifferent. Tourists arrive with cameras, yet even they tend to fall silent as they approach, whispering without meaning to. It exerts that kind of power, the quiet authority of something that has survived all explanations. Scientists now use 3D scanning and chemical analysis to study the granite's origin. Tracing it to quarries miles away near Dole, they can estimate how the builders transported it using sledges and animal labor, and they can model the force required to stand it upright. But even with technology, no one can fully reconstruct the ceremony that must have accompanied its raising. What words were spoken? What songs echoed off the valley? Were sacrifices made, or was it an act of thanksgiving? The stone will not say. Its silence is the point. In a way, it functions like memory itself, eroded, partial, but enduring. The Breton countryside has changed little around it. Fields of barley and wheat sway where once the ancestors may have danced. The air carries the same salt from the Channel coast. The stone's surface continues to drink in rain and reflect moonlight, marking time more faithfully than any clock tower. Some nights, when fog drifts across the plain, it disappears entirely, and locals claim that is when it speaks. They say, if you stand close enough, you can hear a deep hum from within, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Scientists of course dismiss this as imagination, or perhaps the subtle vibration of wind passing the uneven granite, but the legend persists. Even skeptics find themselves listening. In that sense, the Menhir de Champ-Dolent has achieved what its builders likely intended, to connect the visible and the invisible, the mortal and the eternal. It bridges the gap between belief and geology, turning stone into meaning. As you stand before it, you begin to feel how small the span of human life truly is compared to what we can create together. The Menhir is not only a monument to the past, but to the possibility of permanence. Long after names and empires fade, after roads crack and houses crumble, a single stone can still hold the line between sky and soil. Perhaps that is why they called it the spear that pierced the earth, not as a weapon, but as a promise that the world once touched by human hands will never entirely forget us. When night falls across Brittany, the Menhir de Champ-Dolent changes. What had been a pillar of stone in daylight becomes a shadow, an outline against a darker sky. The villagers say it sleeps with one eye open, listening to the earth it once pierced. Even in modern times, people still walk out from Dol de Bretagne to see it under the stars, a silent ritual that has never truly disappeared. The headlights of cars glimmer faintly on its surface. But the Menhir remains the same as it was before metal, before fire, before even writing learned to carve thought into permanence. To look at it in that dim light is to see both the ancient and the eternal in a single form. Scientists and historians have long struggled to classify it. Was it a territorial marker, a funerary monument, or a cosmic calendar? None of the theories fit entirely. When archaeologists mapped its position relative to nearby hills and watercourses, they noticed something uncanny. The stone lies on a subtle natural ridge that aligns almost perfectly with the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice. Such precision is unlikely to be accidental. Across prehistoric Europe, communities watched the sky with patient eyes, seeing in its cycles the rhythm of life itself. To those early farmers, knowing when to plant and when to harvest was a sacred science. Stones like Champ-Dolent may have functioned as earthly reflections of the heavens, a way to fix eternity in granite. Yet even this does not explain why such a singular monument would stand alone. Most menhirs occur in groups or avenues, like the great alignments of Karnak. Champ-Dolent stands solitary, as though set apart intentionally. Perhaps it marked not just a moment in the year, but a memory in the heart of a people. Some researchers suggest it may commemorate a great unifying event, the founding of a settlement, the birth of a lineage, or the peace after a long tribal war. But because no burial or artifact has been found near its base, it refuses to confirm or deny any theory. In its silence, it invites every generation to try again. In the early 20th century, when photography became more common, the menhir began appearing in travel albums and postcards. The captions were always similar. La Pierre de Dolent, mysterious relic of the ancients. Yet the more it was photographed, the less it seemed to belong to the modern world. Locals avoided disturbing it. Construction crews diverted roads to preserve its view. The French government eventually listed it as a historic monument in 1889, acknowledging that it was older than the idea of France itself. But paperwork cannot contain something like the Menhir de Champ-Dolent. It belongs to no single era. Geologists studying its structure discovered that its pink granite came from quarries near Dolent. But there remains debate about the exact method used to move it. Some propose that wooden rollers and ropes of twisted fiber dragged it over wet clay, while others suggest that entire communities built wooden sledges and used animal fat to lubricate the path. Whichever method they chose, the feat is staggering. This stone weighs roughly 100 tons. It would have required the strength of hundreds of people working in perfect coordination. In that sense, the menhir represents one of humanity's oldest collaborations, not between tribes, but between imagination and endurance. It took both to lift the earth into the sky. In the quiet years after the World Wars, scholars returned to Champ-Dolent with new tools and new questions. Some noticed strange acoustic properties around the stone. When sound is made near its base, especially low-frequency hums or drums, it resonates faintly, as though the earth itself responds. Experiments with sonar and ground-penetrating radar have revealed slight disturbances beneath the soil, suggesting that underground cavities or smaller stones may surround the main shaft. These could be remnants of a lost platform or ritual enclosure, eroded away by time. Others have found faint magnetic anomalies, leading to speculation that the builders understood not just stone and sun, but the hidden pulse of the planet itself. Yet such ideas remain controversial. To some, the notion that Neolithic builders could have sensed geomagnetic alignments seems far-fetched. To others, it feels inevitable. Ancient societies often intuited truths that science would later quantify. Even without instruments, they read the patterns of birds, the curve of rivers, the tilt of shadows. They did not separate spirit from science. Both were expressions of attention. The Menhir de Champ-Dolent, in that view, is less a monument than a conversation, a wordless exchange between the human and the cosmic. What makes it even more mysterious is that similar menhirs exist across continents, from the dolmens of Korea to the standing stones of Ethiopia, all built independently, yet sharing a near-religious respect for vertical stone. It is as if humanity, scattered across the earth, reached the same conclusion, that to stand a stone upright is to remind the world it has meaning. In that shared gesture lies a unity older than nations. The Breton farmers who grew up beneath the shadow of Champ-Dolent carry fragments of these old beliefs, even if they no longer name them. Children are still told not to climb the stone, lest they wake whatever spirit sleeps within. During the summer solstice, a handful of people gather to watch the dawn light touch its peak. Some bring flowers, others sit in silence. No festival is announced, no music plays, but something ancient stirs in the air. Even skeptics find themselves moved. For in a world that constantly changes, the menhir is proof that some things can endure without explanation. The idea of endurance is woven deeply into Breton folklore. The land here remembers conquest and loss, from Roman rule to medieval wars and modern battles. Yet its spirit remains defiantly local, rural, and elemental. The stone embodies that endurance. It neither yields nor boasts, it simply remains. When storms sweep across the plain, lightning sometimes strikes near it, splitting trees but leaving the granite untouched. One such storm in 1926 became local legend when a bolt illuminated the stone so brightly that witnesses swore they saw figures carved upon it, faces that vanished when the light faded. Later inspections found no markings, only the same weathered surface. But the story persists, whispered as proof that the stone hides what it has seen. A few years ago, ground analysis revealed traces of ancient fire nearby, charcoal embedded deep in the soil, dated to roughly the same age as the stone's erection. Whether these were remnants of a feast, a cremation, or a ritual, no one knows. Perhaps when it was first raised, torches circled it in celebration, the night alive with music and smoke. The people would have looked up at their new monument, glowing red beneath the stars, and felt the boundary between heaven and earth tremble. Now only the stone remains to remember that night. In the quiet language of archaeology, such evidence might seem small, but to those who visit Champ-Dolent, it feels immense. Standing near it, one senses that the landscape itself was sculpted around this point, as if the land bows slightly in acknowledgement. Even the trees seem to keep a respectful distance, their roots curving away from its base. And yet the modern world continues to press closer. Roads, houses, power lines, but the stone has adapted to every era without surrendering to any. When UNESCO scholars visited the site to study its preservation, they remarked that erosion is remarkably minimal, the granite aging more slowly than most stones of its type. It resists weather as though protected by something unseen. One researcher half-joked that the stone's very age had taught it how to survive. Beneath that humor lies truth. The Menhir de Champ-Dolent has become more than an artifact. It is an organism of memory. It feeds on time, on attention, on wonder. And perhaps that is why people still come, not to solve its mystery, but to feel part of it. The more science reveals, the deeper the mystery grows, because for all its analysis, science cannot replicate the emotional pull of standing in its shadow at dawn, when the first light slides across its surface and seems to awaken it. In that moment, one feels that humanity itself has roots here, that we are all in some way children of those who once lifted stones toward the sky. The Menhir de Champ-Dolent becomes a mirror, showing not only the ancient builders but ourselves, searching for meaning and endurance. There is another story locals tell, quieter but stranger. They say the Menhir hums only when someone with a question stands before it. Not aloud, but inside their bones, a low vibration that feels like thought. Skeptics laugh, yet countless visitors have described an uncanny resonance in their chest when standing close. Maybe it's merely acoustics, or maybe, as some whisper, the stone remembers voices. Over millennia, it has absorbed countless breaths, countless words of hope and sorrow. Each sound leaves an echo too small to measure, yet together they form an invisible archive, a chorus of the living and the dead. To imagine that is to understand why humanity keeps returning to stones like this one. They do not answer, but they listen perfectly. In a world that rarely pauses, the act of being heard by silence is sacred. That is the true mystery of the Menhir de Champ-Dolent. Not how it was built, but how it continues to connect. In the gentle light of morning, dew gathers on its rough sides. Birds rest on its peak, unaware of its legend. Nearby, the village stirs to life, smoke rising from chimneys, tractors rumbling in distant fields. Yet the stone remains timeless, unbothered by centuries or by sunrise. It stands as it always has, an anchor for the world's slow turning. Perhaps when the last human voice has faded, when our cities crumble into soil, the stone will still be there, casting its long shadow across a silent earth, keeping watch. And if the legends are right, and it does sink slowly year by year, then maybe one day it will return to the depths from which it came, closing the circle of its story. But until then, it will stand in the field of sorrow, the spear that pierced the earth, the monument that turned silence into eternity, waiting patiently for dawn, and for us, who still come to remember what it means to endure. The eye that faced the sea. They call it Sigiriya now, the Lion Rock. A sheer pillar of stone rising almost 200 meters from the heart of Sri Lanka's central plains. But long before it became a name on a map, it was something else entirely, a sentinel carved from the bones of the earth itself, its face turned forever toward the distant shimmer of the sea. The monsoon winds coil around its scarred flanks, carrying whispers of rain and salt, the same whispers that may have once guided ancient builders to this impossible place. And as the light shifts from gold to red at dawn, the surface of the rock glows like the skin of some sleeping titan, as if remembering the hands that once shaped its scars. It stands alone, half fortress, half riddle, a monument to ambition, rebellion, and something far older than either. Sigiriya begins not in stone but in fear. The chronicles speak of a prince named Kashyapa, a man whose hunger for power turned brother against brother. When he seized the throne through betrayal and blood, he sought refuge in the sky itself, and found it here, on this towering rock. But what he built was more than a fortress. The stairways that climb its face, the mirrored walls that still shimmer faintly in the light, the painted maidens that once danced across its surface. They belong not to a mere king but to a dreamer, or perhaps to a man trying to escape the ghosts of his own deeds. Archaeologists describe Sigiriya as a palace complex, defensive walls, moats, terraces, gardens, but walk through its remains at dawn when the mists still cling to the earth, and you'll feel something older stirring beneath your feet. The boulders here are carved not just with stairs and gates but with intention. They align to the sun, to the water, and to the wind. The entire plateau feels like an organism, a living thing built from stone, breathing with the seasons. The Lion Gate, whose massive paws still guard the final ascent, once held a face that has long crumbled away. But imagine it, just for a moment, a colossal head of stone, staring out toward the horizon, its open mouth swallowing all who entered. To climb into Sigiriya was to walk through the lion itself, a passage between the world of men and the realm of gods. Inside, mirrored walls once lined the western face, polished with lime and egg white, until they reflected everything that passed by, including the delicate frescoes that hovered above them. The heavenly maidens of Sigiriya, women adorned with flowers, jewelry, and smiles as soft as the morning rain, were painted nearly 15 centuries ago, and yet their gaze remains luminous, alive. Scholars debate who they were, celestial beings, royal courtiers, or guardians of some forgotten ritual. But to stand before them now is to feel watched, as if the rock itself were remembering every visitor who ever dared climb its side. From the summit, the view stretches endless, plains rolling like waves beneath a molten sky. The city once sprawled below, a web of gardens, reservoirs, and processional paths. And yet, even at its height, Sigiriya was not eternal. The chronicles tell that Kashyapa, the king who built the Lion Rock, was betrayed by the very earth he sought to rule. When his army faltered in battle, he turned his own blade upon himself. His fortress fell silent, the lion slept. But the story did not end there. Centuries later, monks came, seeking solitude and silence. They found the mountain's heart still warm, its caves carved with the breath of devotion. They turned Sigiriya into a monastery once again, the hum of prayer replacing the echo of war drums. Yet something about this place never fully returned to peace. Even now, visitors describe the same strange pull, as though the rock were watching them, waiting for something. The air hums, almost audibly, with history. The drip of water from the old fountain still marks time like the slow beat of a heart. The entire plateau seems alive. Scientists studying the site have found that the ancient water gardens, symmetrical pools and channels carved with geometric precision, still function perfectly during the rainy season, draining and filling in ways that suggest not only engineering genius, but an understanding of seasonal hydrology far beyond its era. And yet, no one can explain how such mastery arose suddenly, in the 5th century, in a kingdom that left so little trace elsewhere. Perhaps Kashyapa's builders were more than artisans. Perhaps they were inheritors, drawing upon techniques passed down from older, forgotten civilizations that once looked to the sea for guidance. The alignment of Sigiriya's axis is not accidental. Draw a line from the summit toward the western horizon, and it cuts directly toward the direction of the ancient port of Manti, a harbor once said to have connected Sri Lanka to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Did the Lion Rock serve as a beacon, a watchtower, or something more, an altar where sky and sea met in silent ritual? At night, under the stars, Sigiriya transforms. The air cools, the wind softens, and the constellations rise in the same patterns that ancient priests once read as messages from gods. The top of the plateau, flattened and carved with cisterns, becomes a mirror, and for a moment, the rock seems to breathe again, its reflection shimmering in the pools like a heartbeat beneath stone. Modern excavations have uncovered strange anomalies. Scorched layers beneath the palace floors, residues of minerals that suggest controlled burning or vitrification. Could there have been a fire, a ritual, or was Sigiriya once struck by something not entirely earthly? Lightning, or worse? No one knows, but the walls seem to hum faintly when touched, as if holding an echo deeper than mere sound. The Lion Rock is more than architecture. It is memory fossilized. It is ambition carved into mountain flesh. And though Kashyapa's name has faded, his presence remains, in every echo of footfall, in every beam of light that glances off the rock's red face. Some say that on certain mornings when the mist lifts just right, the faint outline of the lion's head can still be seen in the stone, as though it has been waiting for dawn all this time, waiting, watching and listening to the sea. The Lion Rock never sleeps. Even when the plains fall silent and the wind turns still, there's a hum within it, low, steady, like the pulse of something vast. Those who have climbed to its summit after dusk often describe the same thing. A feeling not of standing above the world, but of standing at its center. Beneath the thin crust of soil and brick, beneath the terraced walls and mossed-over steps, there's something deeper, a structure within a structure. An order beneath the chaos. Archaeologists call it a marvel of engineering. The monks who came later called it a pathway to enlightenment. But to the villagers who live in its shadow, the rock is something far simpler and far stranger. It is the eye, the mountain that watches. Long before Kashyapa's reign, before palaces and frescoes, the hill was sacred ground. The earliest signs of habitation here date back nearly 2,000 years before the king's dream of a sky fortress. The caves scattered around its base bear Brahmi inscriptions, carved in a time when Buddhism was young, and the island was a crossroads of travelers, merchants and wanderers. Some of the caves have smooth curved ceilings and shallow drip ledges, designed to divert rainwater, work that hints at both permanence and reverence. People didn't merely live here, They sought it out. They shaped it. They prayed within it. Something about the stone called to them. It's easy to see why. From the base, Sigiriya looks almost impossible. A slab of ochre rising straight out of the green jungle, too vertical, too perfect, as though sculpted by some colossal hand. Even geologists find it strange. A hardened magma plug, the molten heart of an ancient volcano long since vanished, left standing while everything around it eroded away. In other words, it is a survivor, a wound of the earth that refused to heal, and perhaps that's why Kashyapa chose it. The story goes that after seizing the throne by murdering his own father, Kashyapa feared his brother Moggallana, the rightful heir, would return with vengeance. The plains and the coast offered no safety, too open, too exposed. But here, on this stone sentinel, he saw a kingdom no army could reach. He ordered his builders to reshape the mountain into paradise itself. They carved stairways into its ribs, raised gardens upon its shoulders, and turned the summit into a palace of clouds. But even as the rock grew magnificent, the legend of its builder grew darker. The chronicles say Kashyapa surrounded himself with astrologers, architects, and mystics, men who understood not just construction but celestial order. The gardens below were laid out along lines of symmetry and reflection, mirroring not only the mountain but the heavens above it. The pools were fed by hidden channels that still flow today. The pressure controlled by subtle gradients in the stone. To stand in the water gardens at sunrise is to feel geometry made visible. Each terrace, each curve, each blade of light reflected in the pools was part of a larger pattern. And some believe that pattern wasn't random at all. Archaeologists mapping Sigiriya from the air noticed something extraordinary. The alignment of the gardens, stairways, and palace platforms matches certain star positions in the late 5th century, particularly those of the constellation Leo. The Lion Rock, they say, might not just have been a fortress shaped like a lion. It might have been a lion-shaped observatory, a monument of stone mirroring the sky. The great paws that once flanked the gate, now weathered to ruins, pointed directly toward the rising of the star Regulus, the heart of the lion. Coincidence? Perhaps, but as ancient builders across the world knew, the stars were not mere ornaments. They were memory, the eternal map. If the Lion Rock was built to mirror the heavens, then Kashyapa's obsession takes on a new dimension. Perhaps he wasn't hiding from his brother. Perhaps he was trying to ascend, to join the realm of the gods. In the frescoes, the women who float among the clouds are not ordinary figures. They hold flowers, trays, and shells, symbols of offerings, fertility, and divine union. The entire western face of the rock once shimmered with hundreds of them. Time has erased most, but those that remain seem untouched by centuries. Their pigments, made from local ochre, cinnabar, and powdered glass, glow unnaturally under torchlight, as though charged by the stone itself. Modern spectrographic studies revealed traces of an unknown binding compound, possibly organic, that prevents the paint from fading. No one has replicated it fully. And yet, beneath this beauty lies something unsettling. Beneath the palace floors, in the carved cisterns and basins, archaeologists have found layers of blackened residue, fine ash, carbon traces, and fused sand. These are not the marks of cooking fires or accidental burns. They are the signature of controlled heat, intense, sustained, and deliberate. Some have speculated they were part of cremation rituals. Others whisper of something stranger, fire offerings made to the sky or to the mountain itself. When the rains come, water still flows down from the summit, trickling through channels carved so precisely that droplets fall at even intervals, like the measured beat of a drum. The sound echoes against the walls of the lower terraces, magnified by the stone, until it becomes a kind of rhythm. In the right conditions it sounds almost like chanting, a chorus without voices, tuned by time. That rhythm may have been intentional. Acoustic studies show that certain frequencies resonate perfectly across Sigiriya's central axis. The placement of walls and terraces amplifies sound in ways too specific to be accidental. If one were to chant or play music at the base, the echoes would carry upward in a spiral, climbing the rock like invisible ladders. Perhaps that's how ceremonies once began, not in silence but in vibration. But who taught them this? The technology, the symmetry, the alignment, it all feels like a bridge between worlds. Scholars have pointed out parallels with other megalithic sites across the globe, the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, the temples of Angkor. Each of them links geometry with divinity, stone with sky. Could it be that the Lion Rock was part of a forgotten global understanding, a language of sacred architecture lost to time? When British explorers first rediscovered Sigiriya in the 19th century, they dismissed many of these ideas as superstition. They described the site in the language of empire, fortifications, battlements, irrigation systems, and yet, even they could not deny the feeling of awe the rock inspired. Major Forbes, one of the first to climb it in 1831, wrote that the summit felt like standing on the prow of the world itself. He also noted something odd. Certain sections of the summit brickwork seemed melted, almost vitrified. as if exposed to unimaginable heat. He recorded it but offered no explanation. The report was filed, then forgotten. Today, satellite imaging has revealed cavities beneath the rock, hollow zones that might be natural or artificial. Ground-penetrating radar shows chambers where there should be none, as if something lies sealed inside the mountain. Excavation is forbidden, the site is sacred, protected, but the readings persist. Deep within the heart of the lion, something sleeps. The locals say it is the stone that breathes. They believe that Kashiapa's spirit was bound within the mountain at the moment of his death, that when he turned his sword upon himself, the earth accepted him. On certain nights, when lightning crawls across the horizon, they say you can see a faint shimmer around the summit, like heat over sand. The wind hums, the pools tremble, and for a heartbeat, the rock seems alive again. The monks who took refuge there after Kashiapa's fall left inscriptions that blend history with warning. One, carved faintly near the northern terrace, reads, "He who listens to the stone will hear both silence and truth." Another, more cryptic still, "The lion sleeps, but the eye remains open." Perhaps that is what Sigiriya truly is, not a fortress or a temple, but an eye carved in stone, forever open, forever watching the shifting world below. It faced the sea not because it sought to guard it, but because it remembered it. In ancient Tamil lore, there are tales of a land once swallowed by the ocean, Kumari Kandam, a lost continent said to have stretched far south of Sri Lanka. Its people, the stories claim, were masters of geometry, astronomy, and stone. When the waters rose, they built beacons across the surviving lands, markers to guide the survivors. Could Sigiriya be one of them? A lighthouse not for ships, but for civilizations. A reminder to those who came after that, nothing, not even the earth itself, is forever. As the centuries passed, the Lion Rock weathered it all. War, abandonment, jungle, empire. The forests rose and fell. The rivers shifted course, and still the eye watched. When the sun breaks over it now, its shadow stretches across the plains, touching the ruins of forgotten roads and the faint outlines of villages long gone. Beneath the soil, potsherds and coins whisper of lives lived in its gaze. Potters, priests, children, wanderers, all gone, all recorded in dust. And yet, for all our science and study, we still don't fully understand Sigiriya, the purpose of its alignments, the meaning of its symbols, the mystery of its untouched paints, the secret chambers beneath, all remain unanswered. It resists explanation, as though guarding something too vast for words. Perhaps that's why it endures. The Lion Rock is a story carved in silence, a reminder that not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be witnessed, like the rising of the sun or the stillness after rain. Some eyes were never meant to close, and when the light fades and the plains below slip into shadow, the lion watches once more toward the sea, patient, eternal, waiting for the dawn that never truly ends. The giants beneath the lake. Beneath the restless skin of Lake Michigan, where the waves roll like slow breath and the horizon blurs into sky, lies a silence that few have ever touched. It is a silence thick with silt and time, the kind that swallows sound, light, and certainty. Divers who have descended into these depths describe an uncanny stillness, as if the lake itself is listening. Down there, amid fields of cold stone and drifting sand, something waits, not wreckage, not debris, but structure, deliberate, aligned, and older than the memory of the surrounding land. The story began, as many do, with a scan. In the early 2000s, a team of archaeologists from Northwestern Michigan College were surveying a portion of the lakebed near the Traverse Bay region. They were searching for shipwrecks, familiar ghosts from centuries of navigation and tragedy. But when the sonar returned, it revealed something else, a pattern beneath the water that did not fit the chaos of geology. Rows of stones forming a rough circle, a larger slab standing upright at the center, faintly shaped like a human outline. It was the kind of discovery that doesn't announce itself loudly, but whispers through data. No one believed it at first. The Great Lakes are full of tricks, glacial scars, rock formations twisted by ice, ledges shaped by ancient rivers, yet the alignment on the sonar screen lingered in their minds. Too neat, too intentional, and so, a dive was arranged. The water in that part of the lake is painfully cold, even in midsummer. Visibility shifts like mood, clear for seconds, then clouded with the faint pulse of sediment. The divers descended slowly, following the tether of their guide rope, until the sun's last touch faded to a green twilight. And then, through the dimness, shapes emerged. Stone, yes, but not random. Boulders arranged as if by a careful, deliberate hand, each about a meter across, resting in a loose ring 20 meters wide. At the center, half buried in the sand, a taller monolith rose, broad-shouldered, pitted with age, and etched faintly with what looked like carvings. They could not be sure. The lake keeps its secrets behind ripples of silt and time. But the divers knew, with that peculiar intuition that hums beneath the scientific mind, that they were standing before something not born of accident. When the images were brought back to the surface, they were cautious not to speculate. The team compared them to megalithic sites from across the world, the standing stones of Karnak, the circles of Orkney, even the underwater ruins off the coast of Japan. The scale was smaller here, humbler, but the geometry was undeniable. Some stones formed straight lines pointing toward the ancient shoreline, a shoreline that existed long before the lake as we know it today. 10,000 years ago, the glaciers were retreating. Their immense bodies of ice carved basins, filled them with meltwater, and birthed the Great Lakes. The people who lived then, Paleo-Indians, hunted caribou across tundra plains that are now buried beneath hundreds of feet of water. It is possible, and this possibility is what stirred archaeologists most, that the stones were erected during that forgotten landscape when the lakebed was still dry ground. Imagine the scene. A vast open plain under a pale sky, the last breaths of an ice age cooling the wind. A group of hunters moving across the land, following the migration of their prey. In the distance, rising from the earth like teeth, a ring of stones, markers perhaps, or something more. Maybe they aligned with the stars, or with the path of the herds, or served as a meeting ground where stories were spoken and the dead were remembered. The carvings, if that's what they are, add another layer of mystery. One image, faint but unmistakable to some eyes, appears to depict a mastodon, a creature that vanished from the region roughly 10,000 years ago. If that carving is genuine, if it was made by human hands before the ice melted and the land drowned, then these stones are among the oldest monuments on the continent. Yet the lake resists easy answers. Each attempt to verify the carving has been met with difficulty. Visibility changes daily, sediment builds and collapses. Equipment malfunctions in the cold depths. And so the site remains half known, its details caught between grainy sonar images and fleeting glimpses through the silt. Still, there's something profoundly human about the effort to reach it. Each expedition descends not only through water, but through layers of time, chasing echoes of ancestors who may have once stood on that very spot beneath open sky. The divers describe a strange sensation as they approach the monolith, a feeling of trespass, as though stepping into a place that does not wish to be disturbed. There are legends around Lake Michigan, as there are around all deep waters, stories of vanished cities, of lights beneath the surface, of sounds that seem to come from nowhere. Fishermen have long spoken of places where compasses spin and engines stall, where the lake seems to swallow signals whole. It is easy to dismiss such tales as folklore. Yet the stones lend them a quiet weight, a reminder that every myth begins somewhere. Scientists, of course, remain cautious. They speak of glacial erratics, stones dropped by ice as it melted, coincidentally forming patterns. They speak of sonar illusions, of pareidolia, the human tendency to find order in chaos. But even they admit that certain details defy easy dismissal. One alignment, for instance, corresponds precisely to the summer solstice sunrise 10,000 years ago, when the Earth's tilt was slightly different. Coincidence, perhaps, or memory, carved into stone and preserved by accident beneath the lake's cold heart. Over the years, the site has been visited by a handful of researchers, divers, and filmmakers, each returning with fragments of clarity and more questions than they began with. Some describe the stones as natural, others as unmistakably arranged. The truth seems to shimmer between both. At night, when the lake calms and the waves flatten into glass, it's said that sonar pings echo differently over that area, softer, more resonant, as though the lake is answering back. Some divers swear they can feel a low vibration, almost musical, when they hover above the monolith. Sound behaves strangely underwater. It bends, carries, distorts, but the impression lingers, that something ancient hums beneath the surface. There are few photographs and fewer still that reveal much. The water's opacity hides detail like fog, but to those who have been there, the memory is vivid. One diver described it this way: "It's like walking through a dream that doesn't know you're there. The deeper you go, the more the world above fades. The light dims, the color drains, and time itself feels suspended. At around 40 feet, the water temperature drops sharply, a thermocline that numbs the hands and slows the breath. Below that, there's only the steady rhythm of bubbles, the pulse of the lake, and the slow reveal of stone shapes emerging from the dark. The central slab, the so-called giant, is roughly 2 meters tall, half buried in sediment. Its surface is rough, but strangely symmetrical, like a shoulder and torso weathered by centuries. Along one edge, faint lines intersect. Straight, deliberate, yet worn almost to nothing. It is easy to imagine them as carvings, though they might just as easily be fractures, the lake's own script written in erosion. Still, the mind lingers on the possibility of intent. Who placed these stones? For what purpose? And what became of the people who once knew their meaning? Some researchers suggest it was a hunting drive line, a method used by early hunter-gatherers to guide animals toward traps or ambush points. Others see ceremonial purpose, a place of gathering or ritual, and a few, the quiet few who let imagination breathe, wonder whether it was something far older, part of a forgotten chapter in the human story, erased not by conquest but by water. When the glaciers melted, they did not recede gently. They surged, broke and collapsed in cataclysmic floods that reshaped the land. Entire valleys vanished beneath torrents of meltwater. The ancestors of the Great Lakes were born in violent birth pangs, swallowing plains and forests. It is entirely possible that human settlements, hunting grounds, and sacred places were consumed in the process, entombed beneath the new lakes where no eyes could ever see them again. The stones beneath Lake Michigan could be among those lost remnants, an accident of preservation, a snapshot of prehistory caught in a flood. The fact that we can still sense their presence is almost miraculous. There is a haunting beauty to it, that something made by hands could endure 10,000 years of darkness, pressure, and silence, and still hold shape enough for us to recognize it. As the divers rise, the sunlight returns slowly, washing the world back in color. The surface ripples above them, reflecting clouds like a moving mirror. And as they break through, gasping in air warmer than the water below, it's hard to shake the feeling that they've left a world not meant to be disturbed. Above, the lake looks ordinary again, a blue expanse stretching to the horizon, its secrets invisible beneath waves. But the knowledge lingers. Down there, beneath 100 feet of water, the past is still standing. Cold water rolls endlessly across the surface of Lake Michigan, an unbroken mirror of steel and slate. Beneath it, light dies slowly. Only the faintest rays can reach the stony bottom, where something waits, something vast, silent, and older than the stories that surround it. The divers who first descended into that darkness didn't expect to find a mystery. They were looking for shipwrecks, common relics in a lake that has swallowed more than 6,000 vessels over the centuries. But what they found instead were stones that didn't seem to belong. Massive blocks, weathered but deliberate in their arrangement, standing upright in the gloom. One of them appeared to bear a carving, a shape like a mastodon, tusks curling forward, a creature extinct for over 10,000 years. That single carving changed everything. What began as an ordinary sonar sweep near Traverse City became a question that reached deep into the continent's forgotten past. Who could have built something so vast beneath the waters, and when? The sonar images showed a structure stretching nearly 40 feet, with stones aligned in a pattern far too regular to be coincidence. Yet there were no other known examples of monumental stonework from that period anywhere near the Great Lakes. Archaeologists, geologists, and divers soon gathered around grainy sonar maps, arguing not about if the stones were real, they clearly were, but what they represented. Some suggested it was a glacial formation, a natural coincidence of fractured stone and time. Others pointed out the unnatural alignments, the way the largest monolith stood like a sentinel, its face deliberately smoothed, angled just so. And then there was that carving. The supposed mastodon etched into its side wasn't just a random mark, it bore the curling tusks and heavy shoulders of the Ice Age creature, unmistakable to anyone who looked closely. But if that carving was genuine, it meant the structure could be over 10,000 years old, dating back to a time when humans were only beginning to settle the Americas. Imagine the shoreline then, not the vast cold expanse of water we know now, but a fertile valley, dotted with forests and herds of enormous mammals. The land that now lies beneath Lake Michigan was once dry ground, part of a landscape carved by glaciers but alive with life. Somewhere within that vanished world, people may have raised these stones. The lake's bed preserved secrets like amber, ships, tools, even forests drowned when the water rose. But human hands moving great stones, that was something different. It suggested intelligence, purpose, and ritual at a time when no written words existed on the continent. Researchers used underwater imaging to map the site in greater detail. As they traced the stones' positions, a pattern began to emerge, almost circular, with a central axis pointing toward the setting sun at the equinox. That detail haunted them, because in countless places across the world, ancient people aligned their monuments to the heavens, to track time, the seasons, and perhaps something deeper. Could it be that long before Stonehenge, before the great mounds of Cahokia, before cities rose in the Fertile Crescent, there were people on the North American plains measuring the sun by stone? If so, then the monoliths beneath Lake Michigan would be among the oldest human structures on Earth, but proof remained elusive. The depths were cold and dark, and the sediment covered much of what might have explained the stone's origins. Visibility was often just a few feet, and storms could shift the sand overnight. Each dive was like entering a world erased and rewritten by the water itself. Divers described the place as eerie, utterly silent except for the hiss of air through their regulators, the dim glow of their lights cutting through the suspended silt. Some claimed that as they drifted near the largest stone, they felt something, an almost magnetic pull, a pressure they couldn't explain. It wasn't supernatural, they insisted. Just something A sensation of nearness to history that words couldn't quite hold. When their lights passed over the supposed mastodon carving, it seemed to stare back, its eye hollowed by erosion, yet still alive with intent. The tusks curled into darkness, and behind them, the faint geometry of other stones loomed, swallowed by the lake's endless twilight. The mystery deepened when researchers compared sonar data from nearby sections of the lakebed. They found more anomalies, faint lines of stones, parallel ridges that looked as though they might once have been roads or embankments. It was impossible to say whether these were connected, but the pattern hinted at a settlement, a network rather than a single monument. And if that were true, then this wasn't just a ritual site. It could have been a village, a meeting place, perhaps even a sacred ground for the people who lived there before the waters came. The flooding of the ancient basin that became Lake Michigan occurred as the last ice age melted away. Water levels rose by hundreds of feet, swallowing entire valleys. Forests became reefs, hills became islands. Imagine standing there as it happened, the air heavy with mist, the earth trembling as meltwater from glaciers poured south. Rivers swelled into torrents. The land you called home slowly, irreversibly sank beneath the forming lake, and with it your monuments, your carvings, your prayers. The giants beneath the lake, as locals began to call them, might then be the last markers of a people who vanished beneath the waves, a culture that existed before memory, erased by water and time. Even now, most of what we know about them is drawn from sonar scans and a handful of photographs. The stones are too deep for easy excavation, and disturbing the site could destroy what little context remains. Yet in the stillness of the lake, their story persists. Historians have drawn comparisons between these submerged monoliths and the mysterious megaliths of Europe, the stone circles of Britain, the dolmens of Brittany, the alignments of Karnak. Some have even suggested that ancient traditions of monument building might not have been isolated to Eurasia at all, that similar impulses existed independently in the New World. Perhaps the instinct to raise stones to give shape to the heavens and mark the passage of time was simply human. In the depths of Lake Michigan, that instinct remains frozen in silence. Each year, a few divers return, hoping for clearer water or a new angle of sunlight. They document what they can, the lean of one pillar, the angle of another, the faint etchings that might be art or just erosion. No one agrees entirely on what they're seeing. Science demands evidence, and the lake guards its secrets well. But for those who have floated among those stones, the experience is unforgettable. They describe it not as discovery, but as communion, a quiet awareness that something vast and old still lives there, just out of reach. The stones don't answer questions, they only raise more. Who placed them? Why here, on what was once dry land between ice and forest? Were they marking the seasons, the hunt, or something spiritual, something that bound earth and sky together? When the last sunlight fades from the water's surface, those questions sink again into darkness, resting beside the monoliths that have waited 10,000 years. And maybe that's how it's meant to be, because not every story in the world is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be felt, in the tremor of a current, the glint of light on stone, the knowledge that before history there were hands that built, eyes that watched the stars, and hearts that wondered just as we do now. The giants beneath the lake remain where they have always been, silent, immense, and half-forgotten, carved by time and by human will. A memory, submerged but not lost, and when the wind turns cold and the surface ripples with stormlight, you can almost believe the lake remembers too. The Hill of Silent Stones, the Carrowmore megalithic cemetery, lies in the west of Ireland, on a rise of land that gazes toward Knockarea and the Atlantic beyond. The hill is low, windswept, and quiet. Sheep graze among gray stones that lean from the grass like old teeth. To stand there is to feel that the air itself carries memory. The wind tastes faintly of salt, though the sea is miles away, and the ground is thin, built from centuries of human passage. Beneath the soil, beneath the turf and lichen, lie the bones of time. Archaeologists have counted more than 30 tombs across this single hill, arranged in loose rings and lines that seem to obey a logic half forgotten. Each tomb is a circle of standing stones surrounding a central chamber built from massive slabs of limestone. The slabs are rough-cut, not shaped by metal, yet they balance with a precision that has survived 5 millennia of rain. When sunlight slides across the grass, it threads through gaps between the stones, casting thin bars of gold into the shadows of the chambers. The effect is almost deliberate, as if someone, long ago, wanted to trap the sun for a heartbeat before letting it go. The local people call this place the Hill of Silent Stones. Even in daylight, the air is still, and the sound of the wind seems to stop at the edge of each ring. No birds nest among the dolmens. When mist rolls down from Knockarea, the tombs dissolve into it, becoming humps of gray shadow. For centuries, travelers avoided this place after dusk. They said the stones whispered when no one watched, that the dead spoke softly through the grass. Long before written history, long before the Celtic tongue, people came to this rise and built. They quarried rock from nearby hills, dragging it with ropes made from reeds and hides. They set each piece into place with patience, aligning some tombs toward the sunrise and others toward the distant mountains. Excavations have revealed layers of charcoal and shards of quartz, offerings that glimmered in the firelight of ancient ceremonies. The bones found within are fragile, burned almost to dust, mixed with soil that still smells faintly of smoke. Whoever these people were, they tended to their dead with a tenderness that echoes even now. Standing among the stones today, one can imagine them working by firelight, the night air cool against their skin, the sound of the sea far below, and the stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. Perhaps they believed that by building circles of stone, they could mirror the heavens on earth. Each ring a constellation, each tomb a passage between worlds. Archaeologists debate this, but to the imagination it feels inevitable. The architecture of Carrowmore is not of dominance but of dialogue. Stones set not to rule the landscape but to speak with it. When modern researchers mapped the site with drones and laser scanning, they found subtle patterns invisible from the ground. The tombs cluster along lines that converge toward the center of the hill, forming something like a spiral. At the heart of that spiral lies a larger cairn, half collapsed, its stones buried in turf. This central mound is thought to be the earliest, the seed from which the rest grew. It predates the pyramids by 1,000 years. Each subsequent tomb seems to have been built in reference to it, as if the builders wished to maintain a dialogue with their own ancestors. Over time, the cemetery expanded outward like ripples on still water. From this height you can see Knocknarea to the west, crowned by another great cairn said to hold the legendary Queen Maeve. The two sites, Carrowmore and Knocknarea, seem to face each other across the plain, their cairns aligned like silent watchers. Some scholars suggest this was intentional, a relationship between the living and the mythic. When the sun sets behind Knocknarea, its light strikes the tombs of Carrowmore head-on, flooding them with red and gold. For a few minutes each evening, the entire hill seems to glow from within, and then the light drains away. The soil around these stones is thin but fertile. In spring, small flowers bloom between the slabs, violet, white, and yellow roots winding down through ancient ash. During digs, archaeologists have uncovered fragments of bone pins, beads made from shell, and tiny pebbles worn smooth by handling. These objects speak of human intimacy, not just ritual. The people of Carrowmore carried their dead up this hill, but they also came here to remember, to eat, to sing. The fires they lit were both sacred and ordinary. If one could see the landscape as it was then, the view would have been wide and clear. The Atlantic would have been visible as a strip of silver. Forests of birch and pine would have stretched to the horizon. Herds of red deer and wild boar roamed those woods. To the north, glaciers still clung to the mountains. The builders of Carrowmore lived at the edge of an old world giving way to a new one. They were farmers and herders, yet their monuments suggest something beyond survival, a curiosity about the unseen. Inside the tombs, archaeologists found traces of ochre on the stones, faint red stains that may have once formed patterns or symbols. Time has erased their meaning, but the impulse remains visible, to leave a mark, to make the invisible tangible. In some chambers, fragments of human skulls were found deliberately arranged, as though the builders had sought to assemble a new being from the pieces of the old. Elsewhere, the bones of children lay beside those of elders, perhaps to ensure that life and death remained in conversation. The wind rises as the evening deepens. The grass bends, and the stones hum faintly. A resonance felt more than heard. Tourists who visit speak of a stillness that settles over them, a weight, gentle but insistent. The acoustics of the circles amplify certain frequencies, turning even a whisper into a soft chord. Experiments with instruments have shown that sounds inside the tomb chambers bounce in rhythmic waves, producing a low drone that vibrates through the chest. It may have been accidental, or it may have been part of the design, a way of transforming the human voice into something that seemed to come from the stones themselves. When rain moves across the plain, the stones darken until they appear almost black. Water pools in the hollows where offerings once burned. From above, the circles glimmer faintly, like the print of stars left on the earth. It's easy to see why later generations built legends here. Medieval chroniclers wrote of ancient kings buried in upright coffins, of druids calling storms from the hill, of voices speaking in the wind. Yet beneath those tales lies a deeper, quieter truth. This place predates all of them. It belongs to an age when people spoke with stones instead of writing words. The first serious excavations at Carrowmore took place in the 19th century. The archaeologist George Patry sketched the tombs by hand, noting their dimensions and alignments. He recorded that many had been damaged by farmers who took the stones for walls, unaware of their antiquity. Even so, enough remained to reveal a pattern that hinted at purpose. Later carbon dating would confirm what intuition already suggested. The site was nearly 6,000 years old, one of the earliest and largest megalithic complexes in Europe. Older than Stonehenge, older than Newgrange, it was not an imitation of anything else. it was the beginning. As technology improved, archaeologists discovered that the builders of Carrowmore came from communities spread across the Irish coast. Flint tools found near the tombs matched those from faraway regions. Trade, or at least contact, linked them across great distances. They carried ideas as well as stones. One such idea was the concept of circularity: life, death, and return. The tombs are not merely graves, but portals. The entrances face outward, inviting light and air. To enter one is to walk along the same axis that the sun travels. It is a journey through shadow into brightness, a ritual enacted each day by the world itself. In some of the outer rings, the arrangement of stones mirrors the rising of certain stars. At midsummer dawn, sunlight threads through two tombs in succession, touching a third stone with precision. At midwinter, the setting sun aligns with Nakanaria. These events may have marked the turning of seasons, or served as reminders of continuity. The builders were not primitive stargazers, they were engineers of memory. They created a landscape that measured time without needing numbers. Night falls slowly over Carrowmore. The wind calms, and mist gathers in the hollows. The stones, luminous in the half-light, seem to breathe. In that quiet, it is possible to feel the thinness of time, the way past and present overlap. The same moon that lights the stones now once lit the faces of those who raised them. Their breath mingled with this air, their hands shaped these surfaces. When you touch the cold limestone, you touch them. Scientists studying the soil around the tombs found traces of ancient pollen, meadowsweet, heather, and yew. These were plants used in burial rites across prehistoric Europe. Someone scattered them here thousands of years ago, and their ghostly signatures remain in the earth. The fragrance has vanished, but the gesture persists, recorded in chemistry and dust. Every handful of soil at Carrowmore is a text written in the language of decay and endurance. The story of the Hill of Silent Stones is not one of discovery alone, it is a meditation on what it means to remember. Each generation that has come here has left its own layer of interpretation. The Celts saw the tombs as homes of spirits. The early Christians built crosses nearby, as if to sanctify them anew. Modern visitors bring cameras, drones, and curiosity, yet the stones absorb all these glances without reply. They have become mirrors for whatever people seek in them: faith, wonder, or simply quiet. Occasionally, a shaft of sunlight breaks through the clouds and sweeps across the hill. In that instant, the tombs cast long shadows that stretch and merge, forming a single dark circle. Then the light shifts, and the circle dissolves. It feels like watching time breathe. The stones are not dead. They are in constant conversation with the weather, the seasons, and the gaze of those who look upon them. Erosion is simply another form of speech. At night, when the last visitors leave, and the wind returns, the hill resumes its older rhythm. The temperature drops, dew gathers on the stones, insects hum, and somewhere in the distance, a fox calls. The silence that follows is not empty but full. A silence that holds everything that has ever been said here. Beneath that quiet, beneath layers of soil and centuries, the ashes of the dead rest in their chambers, mingled with the dust of the stones themselves. Life and rock have become one substance, enduring together. Carrowmore is often overshadowed by its more famous cousin, Newgrange, with its decorated passages and reconstructed dome. Yet there is something purer about this hill, an honesty in its exposure. Nothing has been rebuilt. The stones lie where time left them. They need no interpretation panels or lights. They exist as they always have, patient, weathered, watching. To walk among them is to step outside of narrative and into presence. The Hill of Silent Stones does not demand belief. It does not ask to be explained. It simply endures, carrying within it the memory of hands that lifted stone after stone against the pull of gravity and age. In that endurance lies a kind of wisdom, that to build something lasting, one must first listen to the earth, to the wind, to the quiet voice that tells us where to place each piece. Perhaps that is what the builders knew, and what we have forgotten. The night deepens, the stars come out, and the hill becomes a silhouette against their shimmer. Somewhere far below, the Atlantic sighs against the shore. The wind moves softly through the grass, tracing the same paths it has followed for thousands of years, and the stones remain, silent, steadfast, holding the memory of all that has passed across them. They need no words to speak. The hill itself is their language. The whispering pillar of smoke. Beneath the low clouds of central India, where the forests breathe with the memory of vanished kingdoms, there are whispers of a place that no map can lead to. A site that may once have risen in the heart of a valley, now swallowed by jungle and time. They call it the Vimana column, the pillar of smoke, a name pulled from fragments of ancient texts, local folklore, and a handful of archaeological sketches, whose origins are debated even today. The story begins not in the earth, but in the air. In the Sanskrit word Vimana, which drifts across centuries, carrying with it the echo of flight, divine chariots of the gods, palaces that moved among the clouds, and machines that defied explanation. For generations, the Vimana was myth, a symbol of the divine order, a metaphor for power and transcendence. But there were always those who wondered whether the stories hinted at something more tangible, a forgotten civilization whose reach might have extended beyond what history was ready to accept. In the late 1800s, during a survey of British India, a small team of geologists moving through the Satpura ranges claimed to have found something unusual, a monolithic column of blackened stone, standing alone among the trees. Its surface was fused, as though touched by intense heat, and spiraled with faint carvings, marks that, when traced, appeared to rise like a plume of smoke. The men took sketches, photographs, and notes. Yet when the expedition's papers were later filed in Calcutta, that section of the report was missing. What survived was a single page, a brief mention of a fused pillar of unknown origin, rising near a deserted mound, its summit emitting a sound when the wind turned west. The locals had a name for it. Duma Stamba, the pillar of smoke. To them it was not a ruin at all, but a reminder. They said it was once part of a temple that had called down the heavens, a place where sound, fire, and air were bound together. The British officers dismissed it as superstition, but those who heard the story never quite forgot it. Decades later, when independent India began its own archaeological surveys, the tale resurfaced. A young field researcher named Prakash Mehta claimed to have located references to the pillar in the archives of Nagpur University. Within brittle field diaries, he found sketches of an object unlike anything else in the region, a cylindrical monolith, taller than any man, with a spiraling groove carved from base to tip. Some pages described small vitrified stones scattered nearby, fused together as though by lightning. Mehta tried to locate the site himself, traveling deep into the forest near the Tapti River basin, but the terrain had changed. Floods, shifting soil, and decades of regrowth had erased every landmark the old records mentioned. What remained were only the whispers. The carvings, if the sketches were real, bore resemblance to early Brahmi script, but altered, compressed, and unreadable. The lines curved as if to mimic the motion of rising air. When light struck them at certain angles, it was said they shimmered faintly, as though some mineral trapped within the stone caught and reflected the sun. A villager who claimed to have seen it as a boy told Mehta that when the wind blew strongly, the pillar would hum, not loudly, but in a tone deep enough to feel in the chest. To modern ears, this sounds like myth. Yet across India, the phenomenon of singing stone is not unknown. In Hampi, in Karnataka, certain ancient pillars in the Vitala temple complex can produce notes when struck. The stone there, carved with internal cavities, acts as a natural resonator. But in the case of the Vimana column, there was no temple, no hall, and no instrument. Only the open forest, and a single black pillar. By the mid-20th century, interest in the pillar had shifted from archaeology to something more speculative. Theosophists, fringe historians, and even early aeronautical enthusiasts latched onto the legend. They connected it to the Vaimanika Shastra, a 20th century text that claimed to describe flying machines of ancient India. Vimanas powered by mercury, vibration, and light. The text's authenticity was never proven. Most scholars dismissed it as a modern creation inspired by myth. But the imagery was powerful, a civilization that harnessed forces of nature long before modern science, and a pillar that stood as a remnant of that knowledge. The story deepened in the 1970s, when satellite imagery first began to map India's interior with greater precision. In one declassified survey, a faint circular pattern appeared in the Tapti Valley region, a low ring formation, nearly 200 meters across. To the untrained eye it was nothing more than erosion. But to Mehta, now an older man, it matched the radius of the mound described in the lost survey. He believed the circle might mark the base of a vanished structure, perhaps one that once surrounded the pillar. He proposed an excavation, but funding never came. The forests of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra were thick, the terrain unstable, and the priority lay elsewhere. In time, his notes too were archived, unread. It is said that the villagers still avoided that part of the forest. They spoke of strange lights in the mist, bluish flickers that danced low to the ground. Some said it was marsh gas, others, spirits. There were stories of a faint ringing in the air at dawn, like a faraway bell, and always the sound seemed to come from beneath the earth, not above it. In 1998, a small team of documentary filmmakers led by Dr. Reena Chauhan set out to trace the legend. Their film, which was never completed, included interviews with local elders and wide-panning shots of the valley. In one brief scene, less than 4 seconds long, the camera passes over what seems to be a dark vertical shape among the trees. The footage is grainy, the resolution poor, but it has fueled years of speculation. Was that the pillar of smoke? If it was, then it lies somewhere between what can be proven and what can only be felt. The geological composition of the region, basalt and volcanic rock, can produce formations that appear artificial. A cooling basalt column can take on perfectly smooth, vertical lines. The natural spiral might result from wind erosion or mineral veining, and yet those who have studied the legend note one curious detail: the repeated description of heat-fused stone, vitrification. Across the world, a handful of sites show evidence of ancient vitrification: Scottish hill forts, Andean walls, and small sections of Indian fortifications like Rajgarh, where stone appears to have melted and re-solidified. The cause is debated: lightning strikes, ancient fires, or even purposeful heating to strengthen walls. If the Vimana column had truly been fused by heat, it might suggest an ancient ritual involving fire, or a natural event so intense it altered the stone itself. But in local lore, the heat came from the heavens. They say the gods descended in fire, and when they left, the air itself turned to glass. The pillar, blackened and smooth, was the breath of the sky turned solid. From the village of Sakri, an elder named Beharov once recounted the story to Chauhan's team. His grandfather, he said, had seen the pillar in his youth. It stood half a day's walk from the river, taller than any tree, humming in the evenings. Once, during a storm, lightning struck near it, not once but twice, and the sound that followed made the birds vanish for days. He said it was not the sound of thunder, but of air being torn apart. In his words, the pillar called to the sky, and the sky answered. Modern researchers have wondered whether what Beharov described could have been the sound of a vented gas pocket or a seismic echo. The Tapti Basin is geologically active, with natural vents that sometimes emit sound when compressed air escapes through narrow openings in rock. But again, this is hypothesis. No one has verified the pillar's existence since the colonial report, and even that document is fragmentary. Yet the idea persists that somewhere beneath the canopy, among the termite-mounded stones, there stands a relic of an age when myth and material were not yet divided, a monument not to gods but to memory itself. The Vimana column, if real, could belong to one of several eras. The spiral carvings could hint at early Chalcolithic design, similar to motifs seen at Navdatoli or in Amgon. Or it could belong to the later megalithic phase, when iron tools allowed more precise carving. But neither period is known for creating isolated monoliths. More likely, the pillar, if it ever stood, was part of a larger site, a temple, a solar observatory, or a ritual furnace. The term Vimana may have been attached later, retroactively merging the old artifact with evolving myth. In 2012, a group of amateur archaeologists, inspired by internet lore, claimed to have rediscovered the site using drone footage. The images, though intriguing, showed nothing definitive: a cluster of boulders, shadows that could easily deceive the eye. But one frame showed something else: a vertical scar in the earth, nearly cylindrical, its edges smooth. The drone's operator reported magnetic interference when flying nearby. The footage ends abruptly. Such claims are easy to dismiss, yet they raise an unsettling question: why do so many independent accounts describe the same spiral motion, the same resonance, the same faint sound in the air? Perhaps the Vimana column was never a single object, but a metaphor, a way to describe a place where earth and sky met. Perhaps the smoke it whispered was not real vapor, but sound itself, coiling through the air like a visible breath. In that interpretation, the pillar becomes a vessel of sound, a reminder of India's long tradition of sacred resonance, from the deep tone of temple bells to the precise frequencies used in Vedic chanting. Ancient builders knew how sound could shape space, how vibration could alter the feeling of stone and air. A pillar carved in a spiral could, in theory, amplify such effects, turning wind into tone. And so the legend folds back upon itself, a structure born of myth, given form through natural design, rediscovered through wonder. If you were to stand there today, if the pillar still stands, you might find the ground uneven, covered with roots and the scent of wet basalt. You might hear only the wind, moving through layers of leaves, carrying the distant hum of insects. Or perhaps beneath that, a tone so low and steady that it feels not like sound, but like memory itself vibrating through the bones. No one has photographed it since that brief blurred frame. No one has measured it, dated it, or proved that it ever existed. And yet, its image persists, a black spiral rising out of green shadow, half swallowed by the forest, whispering softly as the world around it changes. The Vimana column, the pillar of smoke, remains one of those stories that refuses to die, not because it was ever fully real, but because it speaks to something deep in the human mind, the desire to touch the divine, to anchor heaven to earth, to hear in stone the faint echo of the skies. And somewhere perhaps beneath the canopy of a forest too dense for light, a whisper still rises, not of fire, not of smoke, but of sound. A resonance that never truly ended, only slowed, fading into the rhythm of the living earth. The hand that held the sky. Have you ever stood so close to the bones of the earth that you could hear it breathing beneath your feet? In the southern tip of Chile, where the wind folds itself through canyons like a voice retelling something half forgotten, there stands a hand, not one of flesh, but of stone, vast fingers that reach toward the sky as if to steady the heavens themselves. Locals call it the hand that held the sky. To geologists, it's part of the Torres del Paine Massif, spires of granite rising more than 2,000 meters, carved by time and glaciers, hardened by the patience of millions of years. But to those who live under its shadow, to the descendants of those who wandered this land before names were written or measured, it is something more. They say that once, long before men drew borders across maps, the sky began to fall. It slipped slowly, quietly, like a blanket loosening from the shoulders of a sleeping world. The stars were closer, brighter, and the mountains bent under their weight. And so the earth reached up, and from her body grew a hand of stone, vast and unyielding, to hold the heavens in place. Even today, when the sun drifts low and the wind threads through the valleys, it's easy to believe it. The journey to this place is not gentle. The road leaves behind the last whisper of civilization, the scattered roofs of Porto Natalis, the sigh of the last ship that vanished beyond the fjords, and runs into a landscape that seems to belong to another age. The wind never stops. It roars through the Lanka forests, flattening the grass until it gleams like silver in the light. Guanacos lift their heads and watch you pass, still, cautious, as if measuring the weight of your intentions. There is something ancient about the silence here. It's not empty, it's full of echoes. Every gust, every crack of shifting ice from a distant glacier, every shadow cast by a condor spiraling overhead, feels deliberate. You could almost think the land is alive, waiting, and then, one day, through the mist, you see it. The hand that held the sky. From afar it doesn't seem real. The three towering spires of Torres del Paine rise like colossal fingers pressed against the blue. The central tower, the largest, gleaming pale gold under the morning light. Around them, snow gathers and drifts, and the sky seems thinner somehow, closer, as if it might slip again, if the stone forgot its purpose. Travelers have tried to describe this place for centuries, and none have truly succeeded. Some compared it to a cathedral built by gods rather than hands. Others said it looked like the fossilized bones of a titan who once held the stars. But to the first people who came here, the Otinik or Tehuelche, it was simply the center of the world. They told of Coax, the god of creation, who was born alone in darkness. From his sorrow came the sea, from his breath, the wind, from his tears, the rain. When he looked upon the new world he had made, he feared it might crumble, and so he raised a mountain in the far south, a hand of stone, to hold the heavens steady until men learned to stand upright beneath them. And in the long years that followed, the Otinik wandered these valleys with the wind at their backs. They painted stories on the rocks, handprints, red and black, pressed against the cliffs of the Patagonian caves. Each hand a promise, each mark a voice. They believed those painted hands echoed the hand that held the sky, as if humanity was reminding the earth that they too could hold on. The archaeologists who came centuries later found those hands and puzzled over them. Some dated them to over 9,000 years ago, some even older. Small, delicate outlines. Men, women, children, all facing outward, palms open to eternity. Beneath layers of ochre and dust, they discovered that the pigments came from crushed hematite and volcanic ash, mixed with the fat of hunted guanacos. But what the stones meant, no one could say. One archaeologist, a quiet Chilean woman named Inés, once said she believed the cave hands were not merely art, but maps. Each handprint, she said, corresponded to a direction of the wind, to a path through the mountains. The open palm marked a place of crossing. The fingers pointed towards something sacred, and when she traced the patterns of those hands onto a map, she found they led here, to Torres del Paine, to the hand that held the sky. She came here once, years ago alone. Her journal, later found in the archives of the Museo Nacional, describes the moment she saw the towers for the first time. The clouds were like smoke rising from the shoulders of the earth. I thought I was looking at something alive, not stone, not sky, but something in between. I felt very small and very old at once. She wrote of strange sounds in the wind, low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. And though she was a scientist, trained to dismiss myth, she couldn't shake the sense that the rock itself was aware of her presence. She stayed for 3 days and nights, sleeping beside a glacial lake, watching the towers turn from silver to gold to rose under the long southern light. She said she dreamed of hands, vast, shadowed, reaching from the deep to touch the stars. Some say India's never returned to the city. Others claim she did, but spoke less and less of the mountain until her death. In her final notes there was one line underlined 3 times. It is not the mountain that holds the sky, it is the memory. When you stand beneath those towers, that line feels truer than any measurement or legend. The granite is ancient, formed deep beneath the surface some 12 million years ago, when molten rock cooled slowly within the earth. Over eons, glaciers carved away the softer stone around it, leaving only these vertical giants behind. The ice retreated, the lakes formed, and the wind took over, sculpting, polishing, shaping. What remains is both natural and impossible. And yet, there's something uncanny about the way the three main towers stand. They are not random pillars, but aligned, slightly curved, as if following a pattern. Some researchers once suggested they correspond to the three stars of Orion's belt, just as the pyramids of Giza do on the other side of the world. The idea was dismissed as coincidence, but those who have stood here at night when the wind stills and the stars burn white above the peaks say the alignment is too perfect to ignore. It's not hard to imagine that ancient wanderers, guided by the stars, might have seen this place as sacred, a reflection of the heavens cast into stone. In Patagonia, the boundary between myth and landscape has always been thin. The people here have stories for every mountain, every river. They speak of the ones before time, beings of rock and storm, who shaped the world with their movements. One tale tells of a giant named Karen, who tried to climb to the heavens using the mountains as steps, but the wind god, jealous of his ambition, turned him to stone mid-climb. His fingers froze reaching upward, and so he became the hand that held the sky. When the first European explorers reached this region in the 19th century, they too felt the strangeness of it. Charles Darwin, traveling aboard the HMS Beagle, never reached Torres del Paine itself, but he described Patagonia as a land of silence and grandeur, where the winds speak louder than men, and indeed, that's what one feels here most, not solitude, but dialogue. The wind carries stories. Across the lakes you can hear what sounds like whispers, though it's only the rush of air through ravines. Sometimes it mimics voices, sometimes it hums like song. At dawn, the light hits the granite like a revelation. The towers glow as if lit from within, soft amber deepening to crimson. The glaciers below shimmer blue, and the air feels clean enough to taste. Everything here is sharp and fragile at once. If you climb higher, to the base of the towers themselves, you find the world narrowing. The air thins, the path disappears into boulders and moraine. Around you, waterfalls descend in veils of mist. And when you finally stand before the monoliths, it's not the view that takes your breath, it's the scale. The towers rise sheer from the earth, without foothold or slope, like something pulled upward by the hand of a god. Touch the stone and it's cold, almost metallic. But if you press your palm there long enough, it seems to hum faintly, a vibration too low to hear. Perhaps it's the wind, or perhaps it's something older. In the evening, when shadows climb the rock, the towers darken until they seem to dissolve into the sky. Then for a brief moment before night fully falls, the peaks catch the last light, and the illusion is perfect, a hand of gold holding up the heavens. Local guides sometimes tell visitors not to stay too late by the lake. They say the mountain doesn't like to be watched after dark. There are stories of those who tried. Climbers, photographers, wanderers, who claimed to hear voices echoing from the stone. Some even said they saw shapes moving between the peaks, like figures of light. One man swore he saw a giant handprint appear on the lake's surface before vanishing into ripples. No one believes such things, of course, yet when the wind rises and the moon casts silver across the towers, you might find yourself believing, if only for a heartbeat. In the quiet between gusts, it feels as if the mountain itself is breathing, the same rhythm that's echoed here for 10,000 years. The same pulse that guided the first hands that painted the caves, and in that silence you understand what Inivals meant. The mountain doesn't hold the sky, memory does. The memory of stone, of time, of every creature that has looked upward and wondered. The hand that held the sky endures, not just as a marvel of geology or myth, but as a reminder that the earth too remembers. When dawn comes again, the peaks turn pale gold, and the world begins anew. The wind resumes its endless whispering, and the lakes mirror the heavens. The hand still reaches upward, steady, unchanging, keeping its ancient promise. And somewhere beneath it all, the world keeps breathing. Thank you for wandering through the silence with us. If you felt the Earth's old whispers tonight, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Your presence helps these forgotten stories keep breathing. Until next time, may the Earth's quiet keep you company.